minister in England was because the executive used to be the royalty. Tradition got rid of the royalty out of that whole deal. But the bottom line is the Electoral College is not a quote unquote parliamentary system. I do not have a problem with the Electoral College because it does serve an important function, but that function is not to exclude 40 of the 50 states. In fact, the framers of the Constitution thought that the states would use that power to maximize their influence over who became president of the United States. And a system that the winner-take-all system that excludes 40 of the 50 states is not maximizing your power.
But I think to Trent's point, he was saying that if we did away with it, then maybe candidates could campaign in just the most populous states. They could go to New York and California, and that's all they'd need to do.
Well, New York and California together are 18% of the population of this country. 82 to 18 loses every time. But he also ignored Texas. You know, Texas is the second largest state. Florida is the third largest state. You got to get to number 5 before you get to New York. The bottom line is when every single vote in every single state matters in every single election. For those of us who run for office and actually won, we know if every single vote matters, you campaign for every vote. You don't just ignore the 8 or 9 million people of Tennessee or the 2 or 3 million people of Kansas or the 4 or 5 million people in Missouri. You just don't ignore them. You actually have to come up with a strategy and a policy initiative that involves them in the decision-making process. And that's the problem with winner take all. What Trent is defending is not the Electoral College. He is defending the winner-take-all laws, and the Constitution has a specific process for if a state decides that that's not the best way to choose its electors, it can choose a different system, and we're talking to them about choosing a different system.
So Trent, what do you say to that? So he's saying, yeah, New York, California, that's just 18%. It wouldn't be that way, and he throws in there Texas. That's another kind of on the other side of that. But what do you say to what he's saying there?
Well, what Ray is trying to do is really, if you picture a map of the states, he's trying to pull up the state lines, wipe them away, right? And so it's even misleading to talk about states in a post-electoral college world or with this national popular vote compact scheme to try to sort of wire around it. The states would not exist, right? You would have media markets, you would have metropolitan areas. And, I think it's instructive for folks in Tennessee to know Los Angeles County, right? The kind of the LA metro area, but just using the county of Los Angeles has 10 million people in it. That's far more people than live in the entire state of Tennessee.
It's about twice the size.
So,
that one county is about twice the size of our whole state.
Yeah, right. I mean, that's a dramatic difference, and that's actually part of why we have the Electoral College. Ray is a little bit off when he says, parliamentary systems are totally different. The original rough draft of the United States Constitution called for a parliamentary system. That was the founders' original plan. They didn't want to do that because they were worried about congressional politics kind of infecting or controlling the executive branch. They wanted an independent executive. And so they talked about a popular vote. And James Madison actually stood up in the Constitutional Convention and said, I like the idea of a popular vote, but we can't do that because the biggest population areas would control the whole country. And Madison sort of sent the convention searching for another way. And the Electoral College was a kind of a compromise. It's a little more democratic than a parliamentary system, but it's based on the math in Congress. It's based on the idea of a parliamentary system. And if Ray doesn't like parliamentary systems, he should look at India and Germany. India, when they declared independence, created an electoral college so that they wouldn't be subject to radical regional politics tearing their country apart. And Germany, after World War II, created an electoral college type system to prevent the rise of another Adolf Hitler, because when you have this two-step democratic process that introduces some incentives towards moderation, protects you from this regionalism that we've been so well protected against in the United States. So our electoral college system is very similar to these other countries' systems. And, the idea that suddenly every place is going to be like a swing state, right? we know that's not true, because campaigns only have so many resources. They only have so much time. They only have so much money. They will still focus in certain places and ignore other places. That's campaign strategy. That's why they hire pollsters and consultants and people like that. Ray's painting a picture of politics that I wish we could achieve, but it's just not reality.
So not reality. So Ray, I said at the top of the show, I think I said do away with the Electoral College. You're not talking about that, but let's talk about what you are exactly saying. It's called the National Popular Vote, and this is something that's been passed in a certain number of states. Is that right? I guess tell us what you are exactly advocating here and where it stands.
The National Popular Vote Interstate Compact is a compact. It's basically a contract between states in which the member states agree to award their presidential electors to the person who gets the most votes in all 50 states. So it changes that winner-take-all law that I'm talking about. Takes effect when we hit 270 electors, because that's what it takes to win the presidency. That's how you guarantee the presidency to the person who gets the most votes in all 50 states. It also has a withdrawal clause. It says, if the state ever comes to the conclusion it's not in the state's best interest to be in the compact, they can get out. And if it ever falls below 270, it goes away. The bottom line is, look, for anybody that's run a campaign, you do not ignore any voter anywhere. There are, in 2016, there were 430 presidential campaign visits. Those visits were concentrated in 12 states. There are 435 congressional districts. What would end up happening is that instead of just going to Florida, Ohio, Iowa, North Carolina, Arizona, everybody knows the states, we're already watching them, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, we're watching them all flow out. Presidential campaigns will go to every single state. Right now, Ohio and Florida have a 7,000% commission requirement. If you want to buy time on television or radio, there's a 7,000% premium, because everybody wants to buy time on those radio stations and television stations. This would spread that money out about the country.
What Trent just said is that's kind of wishful thinking, that campaigns have limited resources and they would still just focus on a few states. You really feel like it would be
Every campaign I know has limited resources. I ran in a Senate seat that had 1 million people in it. Okay. Now, I had a strategy to maximize my vote, but I didn't ignore any voter in my district. A presidential campaign would ignore voters at their own risk. If somebody thinks that you don't campaign to every single voter and ask every single voter in some way for their vote, that's either ignorant or naive, because you cannot win in just a couple of states. You would have to campaign to every voter. And I'll give you this example. 1/6 of the people of this country live in the 100 largest cities. Interestingly enough, 1/6 of the people live in the rural areas, which is everything outside the metropolitan statistical areas. The other 2/3, the suburbs and the exurbs, are, as I say, the urban areas vote 60% Democrat, the rural areas vote 60% Republican. They kind of cancel each other off. And the suburbs and the exurb vote 51-49 Republican or Democrat, depending on the candidate, depending on the issue. The fact is, you could not ignore rural areas and you could not ignore the suburbs and just concentrate on the big cities. And that's a strategy for losing.
Okay, and really quickly, I want to nail this down. So you're supporting a national popular vote. How many states have signed on to that at this point?
Right now, we're at 15 states, equaling 196 electoral votes. We need 74 more.
And how long has it taken you to get to that point?
Let's see, I've been involved in the project for about 8 or 9 years.
Do you feel like that's an end around the Constitution or an end around the way the Founding Fathers wanted this to work? Do you worry that's an end around, there's another way to do it, and that's...
The only way to look at this is to look at what the language of the Constitution says. And it says, each state shall appoint in such manner as the legislature thereof may direct. The framers of the Constitution could not agree on a method of electing the President of the United States, so they handed the decision off to the state legislators. This is going to end up, it's why it's taking so long, is we have to go to every single legislature and talk to them about why this is better for their state than the current system. The current system ignores 40 to 45 of the states. This system makes every single state important. That's what we have to convince the state of. It's also what takes so long to do what needs to be done. And, we have good years, we had bad years. That last year we had 5 states join. The year before that we had 0 states join. So it takes a little bit of time, and you got to talk with every single legislator. I actually think the framers got it right in terms of putting this decision in the hands of the state legislature, because every state legislator has an opinion on this, and they are concerned about how we're doing it, and we're doing it the way the framers thought it should be done.
So, Trent, they are 74 electoral votes away. You can decide how many states that is. Obviously, some are bigger. It's not that far, it doesn't sound like. How concerned are you that this will actually happen?
Well, I'm very concerned. They launched this effort in 2006, and I started my group in 2009 to make the case for why this is so dangerous. And at the time we started our group, they were actually on track to put it into effect before the 2016 election. They were winning states at that rate, and we're glad that we stopped them from doing that. And obviously could have changed the outcome of the 2016 election. But I think it is a real concern. Every state that has adopted this is all on, they're all on one side of the political fence. They're all states that have voted Democrat in all the recent presidential elections going back to at least 2008, most of them going back a lot further than that. And it is an end around. The fellow who created the National Popular Vote campaign, and who still is the chairman of the National Popular Vote campaign, told the New York Times this is an end run around the Constitution, but an end run is a legal play, right? That was his argument. We know that the founders would be completely shocked by this. They rejected a national popular vote. They voted against it. They put the power into the states to represent their own states, right? Tennessee's legislature has the power to figure out how to represent Tennessee. We know that's the purpose of the Electoral College. There's no question when you go back and read the records of the constitutional debate, the ratifying debate, right? The power was to represent the states. What the National Popular Vote Compact is trying to do is to get states to give away that power, which is a real live constitutional question. Can they do that? And what would happen? Because if Tennessee ever entered into this compact, Tennessee would have to act like voters in Texas and in Arkansas and in California are voters in Tennessee for the purpose of presidential elections, which typically would violate the 14th Amendment requirement that your election has to be run under the same set of rules when all those votes are mixed up together to create one result. There's some real constitutional problems with this National Popular Vote Compact.
So, Ray, when I hear him say that you only have Democrat states that have signed on to this, Democratic states, how likely do you feel like you can get a Republican state? What is your argument if you come into a state like Tennessee, or how likely is it, do you think you'll get a Republican-leaning state to sign on?
Well, I will say this. The Republican Senate in Oklahoma, Trent's home state, enacted this for reasons that...
They did not enact...
Hold on a second. They voted for it. There was a 28-18 vote. The Senate in Oklahoma voted for it. The Republican-controlled House in Arizona voted for it. There are good, solid, we've gotten support. In Georgia, 48 of the 56 members of the Senate, including 36 Republicans, co-sponsored the bill. The fact is, when Republicans actually sit down and listen to the real arguments, as opposed to, God love Trent, he's a good guy, but he's really good at throwing mud against the wall and seeing what sticks. The bottom line on it is, when Republicans actually sit down and think about all of the political and policy implications of winner take all, they start going, gee whiz, as Republicans, we have some issues with winner take all. Over time, it takes a little bit of time, because Democrats look at it and they go, well, gee whiz, 2016, it would have elected Al Gore and Hillary Clinton. That's first of all, that's not true. Anybody who says it's true, even Donald Trump himself said, if it had been a popular vote election, I'd have won that election. But when you sit down and walk Republicans through the policy and political implications of winner take all, they start changing, which is why the Republican-controlled Senate in Oklahoma and the Republican-controlled House in Arizona enacted it, or didn't enact it, but voted for it. Bottom line on the thing is there are solid Republican arguments. The New York Republican-controlled Senate voted for it. So bottom line is, well, while indeed at this point in time, the states that have actually signed it into law tend to vote blue in a presidential election, Republican legislators across the country have voted for this bill. In fact, in 2016, there were 156 Republican co-sponsors of the bill and 162 Democrat co-sponsors of the bill. It's a true bipartisan effort at making every single voter in the country relevant to a presidential campaign.
Trent, it sounded like you wanted to say something about Oklahoma there.
Well, that's right. I mean, Ray is kind of turning the history around. The reality of what happened in Oklahoma,
I was there. I actually was there, Trent.
Is that you're going back to 2014? What happened in Oklahoma, which was before I lived in the state, was that the National Popular Vote lobbyists took a bunch of our state legislators, all Republicans, on a trip to a very expensive resort, and nobody knew this was going on. None of their constituents knew this was going on. Other Republican legislators, I'm told, didn't know this was going on. And when these guys came back from this very expensive resort after only hearing one side of the story, they introduced the legislation, they passed it, and when constituents found out about it, the Capitol was flooded with angry calls and letters. The House refused to do anything with it, and they haven't been able to find a bill sponsor since then, right? I mean, in the last 5 or 6 years, they can't find anybody in Oklahoma willing to sponsor their legislation. So it's true. It once passed in the Oklahoma State Senate. It once passed in the Arizona House. Same thing in Arizona, right? I mean, but what's not true is that it passed when they had only heard one side of the story, and once legislators have been educated about this, they've been unwilling to touch it because they realize it gives away the power of their state. It gives away the power of their voters. Again, Los Angeles has, more than double the number of people in the entire state of Oklahoma. We're a little bit smaller than Tennessee, and legislators, Republican and, as far as I can tell, Democrats in Oklahoma have said, we're not going to do this.
Okay, all right.
Democrats in Virginia.
Everything he just said is absolutely out the door false. That the Oklahoma Council on Public Affairs that Trent works for now actively lobbied against it. I was the lobbyist for the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact in Oklahoma. We didn't take them to an expensive resort. We didn't do the things that he talked about. We didn't do that in Arizona because I was also the lobbyist in Arizona. I sat down member by member and persuaded them in the face of active opposition in Oklahoma, particularly from Trent's organization. So
it's fascinating.
Outraged.
We're going to have to take a break, and then we'll get back then to the essence of the argument. And I'm fascinated even by the process that this is all going through. So I appreciate you both. We're going to take a break. We'll also take some phone calls. If you want to call in, there's the number, 615-737-PLUS, 615-737-7587. Take a break. We'll be back right after this.